Hi, I'm Kathy Williams with the Developmental Disabilities Resource Board. Today we're going to talk about our residential startup policy. The DDRB wants to assist individuals as they're moving out into the community and recognizes that when someone moves into the community for the first time, they have many expenses in order to establish their household. The DDRB wants to be one of many players assisting that individual with establishing their household. There are a couple main criteria that are important to go over in regards to this policy. The one is that it should be a collaborative approach between the individual, their family, their support team, and the agency and their case manager, and helping them establish what items that they'll need when they move out into the community. The DDRB realizes that the amount of funding that they will be eligible for will not cover all of their expenses. The individual and their support team should work together in establishing the items that the individual needs, and then use the available resources by the Developmental Disabilities Resource Board in obtaining those items and looking for other community resources to fill the need for the other items. First, there are a couple qualifications for the agency that's supporting the individual. The agency needs to be a Department of Mental Health vendor providing residential services and/or independent living services to eligible St. Charles County residents. The second is that the agency needs to sign an annual contract for startup funding with the DDRB prior to making any services. It's critical that the agency sign and complete that contract on a yearly basis so that they're able to assist their customers in accessing those funds. There's a couple of criteria in how to access these funding. The DDRB does have initial residential startup funding and secondary startup funding. Individuals living in the community for their first 7 years can access the initial startup funding, which is $3,000. After they've lived in the community for over 7 years, they are eligible for our secondary funding, which is $1,500 per individual, and that is for ISL and ILA customers. For individuals who live in group homes or host homes, they're eligible. Their initial startup funding is $1,500, and their secondary startup funding is $1,500. There are a couple criteria in assisting the individual with making these purchases. The first being that the individual should be an active participant in obtaining their items that they want to purchase. Some individuals have challenges that make it more difficult for them to go to their local store to pick out items. Individuals could be encouraged to look online to make these purchases. They could even select the items and go to the store once for a pickup. Using creativity to keep the individual involved in the process is what the DDRB would like to encourage. Another thing, although it's not written in our policy, we would prefer that individuals would be encouraged to make their purchases in St. Charles County, as those tax dollars will then be reinvested in the community. Another item is that individuals should be encouraged to buy quality items within their budget. And that might take some creativity. If an individual would like to purchase these items as used items from either family members or online, they're eligible to do so. They just need to obtain a valid receipt. The DDRB does have a list of items that are approved for reimbursement for our residential startup. This list, again, is not a comprehensive list, but the DDRB will only provide reimbursement for the items listed on the sheet. Please do not write in other items or purchase items and turn in a request for funding for items that are not listed on the receipt. We do not make exceptions to the form. The only way that we will make an exception is if an individual has an identified need as outlined in their individual support plan that requires them to have something specialized based on their disability. An example would be potentially a food processor for an individual who cannot eat solid foods. They might need that item so that it would be documented in their plan, and then they could purchase that item. All receipts should be obtained and categorized on the form, put in order, and the dollar amount should be listed next to the item purchased. For all items requested, a receipt must be attached and must be listed on the reimbursement sheet. Then all of the information is totaled up with a request for reimbursement. That should be submitted to the DDRB. Individuals, agencies have 1 year from the date of the first purchase to get reimbursement for their expenses. We encourage that people not wait a year, as receipts may get lost, but we do allow for an extended time based on family might be submitting receipts to the agency, and an individual might not need to make all their purchases at once. They need to be submitted with the individual's name, the form completed, to the DDRB for reimbursement. On the residential startup reimbursement form, there are 2 columns. For individuals who are receiving ILA and ISL funding, they can access all the items in both columns. For individuals who are receiving residential group home services and/or host home services, they can only access items listed on the right side of the form. Again, they should be totaled up and receipts attached and submitted for reimbursement. Individuals first will use their initial startup funding, regardless of how many years they've been in the community. An example would be someone has lived in the community for 8 years and still has money remaining in their initial startup funding. They would access that funding first, and then after they've used all that money, then they will be eligible for the secondary funding. They should just purchase what they need. The DDRB keeps a file on each individual and always knows how much available funding that they have, and they can access it whenever they need it. So there's no rush to go out and spend all the money at one time. It'll be available for future purchases. Another criteria is for individuals who have resided in a state habilitation center, are not eligible for their first 7 years of living in the community for our startup funding. So they are not eligible for our initial startup funding. This is because the Department of Mental Health will assist them when they're moving out of the state habilitation center with those startup costs. So the DDRB does not want to be the primary funder in that area. After they've lived in the community for 7 years, they then are available for our secondary startup funding.